In this video, we are going to talk about the Visitor to Worker program that was announced to be extended by 2 years in February of this year. We are going to talk about the common myths and misunderstandings around this program and what you should do to prepare if this is something you are trying to undertake. Hi, and welcome back to As Told by Canadian Immigrants. I'm Christina.
And I'm Michael.
And together we're going to discuss this Visitor to Worker program, what you need to know, what you need to unknow, and how to succeed if this is something that you're trying to do. So first and foremost, the Canadian government or the Canadian immigration body decided that they're going to allow visitors to be able to come to Canada, and if they're able to find employment, they're able to apply for a work permit and then stay in Canada and work for whatever tenure of or whatever length of work that they were given based from an employer. Now, when people see that, people hear that, it sounds very attractive and sounds very shiny. You're like, oh, you can just go as a visitor and find a job. And what we want to dispel is the idea that it is just that you just show up anywhere in Canada and then you go to any old employer and say, employer, please hire me. And if they say yes, you're going to get a work permit. That's not the case. Okay. So it's important for you to know that, for you to understand that, so that you can really be successful if this is something you're going to go. So I'm going to navigate over to the page on the Government of Canada website. And this is just something that you can Google. You can just say Canada Visitor to Worker, and then you're going to look for the site that says CIE. So CIC, sorry. So this is the website here, and this is the announcement when they extended it so that, visitors can continue to apply for work inside Canada, and has been extended for 2 years. And this was issued on February 28th of this year, 2023. Navigate down to here where what makes you eligible for doing this is that, one, you must have valid status in Canada. So valid status is a visitor's visa, of course. So you're here as a visitor. Then this one is where it is extremely important to understand. So you must have a job offer that is supported by a labor market impact assessment or an LMIA exempt offer of employment. And this is exempt by either an employer who has already qualified that they are exempt or had already gotten approval for the government to be LMIA exempt. So I'm going to touch quickly on what LMIA means in a nutshell, in as short of a sentence or two as possible. LMIA, Labor Market Impact Assessment. For an employer to qualify or to get approved for this, they have to prove to the government that they are trying to fill a position and nobody locally is either applying or is qualified to do the job. And so therefore they need to go outside of Canada to try and find somebody. Now, if you think about that, I think I spoke about this in my last video with Minerva. For an employer to really qualify for this, they'd have to prove that the job is either specialized or it's a job that nobody wants, right? Or it is in some remote area where there aren't a lot of people. And so there's the people, nobody from Toronto necessarily is going to apply for a job that's 5 hours out unless they're willing to relocate, right? So you have those three scenarios: job nobody wants, or a very specialized job, or a remote area where there's nobody there. So in order for the employer to prove this to the government, they would have had to post the job offer on whatever public sites that are available, or even the Canada Job Bank. Then they would have to accept applications. If people apply, they have to accept them. They have to vet the applicants, and then they have to qualify to the government why these people don't qualify for the job. Why we can't hire this person because XYZ, which, as you can imagine, if somebody applies, the likelihood of them not being qualified for the job may be slim if it's a general, regular job. So now, what does this mean for you? Can you show up in Toronto looking for a job where Torontonians are looking for the same job and get a work permit? No. And that's the biggest myth that is out there about the ease of this visitor to worker program. So now we're going to kind of segue into, okay, if not that, then what? What does LMIA exempt mean, and where do you find an LMIA exempt employer? So there are programs that are in probably remote parts of Canada or in underpopulated parts of Canada where the employers they have already qualified to the government that they can't find anybody, right? And these are regular jobs. It's not necessarily a highly skilled or a job nobody wants. It is just that there's not enough people in that area applying for jobs, so there's nobody to do the job. These places are like in Atlantic Canada or in rural and northern Canada. And rural and northern Canada is spread out across the different provinces. So it could be anywhere. It could be in Ontario, it could be in Alberta, anywhere that they constitute as rural and northern Canada. There, you will find employers quite easily that are already LMIA exempt and need employees to work. So now is where Michael's going to jump in, even though I've been talking for however long to myself. Sorry. So now you know where you should go and where you should not go, sort of, right? But should you just show up and hope to find an employer and a job? And this is where these experts will jump in and comment on that.
Yes. It's basically a matter of the market value. So the more attractive you are as a potential employee, the more willing the potential employer will be to make a lot of efforts. So it's actually, I would say it's wrong to say you should. It's not that you shouldn't go for jobs in Toronto. It's just more difficult to get one in Toronto than in rural places. So it depends on a lot of aspects. Obviously the profession, but also your experience and the job market in terms of how difficult it is to actually find someone in Canada. Now, you may even stand the chance to find a good job in Toronto if you can sell yourself as someone who is truly special. So the fact that there are 10 others in Toronto who could do kind of the same does not mean that the employer is interested in them. If you market yourself, well, convince the employer successfully that it's really worthwhile making all these efforts to get you over and get the visa for you and so on, proving this to the government, simply because they really want you. So the more they want you, the better, the more they will be willing to do whatever it takes to get it done. So that means if the market value is very high, the better your options are in terms of dealing with all these hassles and also moving to a very attractive location. So now the less you can bring to the table in terms of the attractiveness of your profile, of course, the more these other aspects play a role, because they then can mean that you actually, although you're not the perfect candidate, you get the job in Canada anyway, because you're the only candidate. There is no competition, because as you pointed out, Christina, no one wants to go there, or there are other reasons why they simply cannot find someone. Now, so it's the most important thing is to evaluate your market value correctly. And of course, even if it's high, you need to pay attention to that the other side actually understands it. So just that the fact that you believe you have a great market value is not a market value. The market value is high if the other side, that the potential employers, see it as such. So you need to have a fair evaluation of where you are in this spectrum. And that's only possible by doing research. So you need to know about where the potential employers are in general, what kind of people they are looking for, how much of what they need you have, or maybe you have, you are beyond that, you can bring more to the table than they expect. So you need to research that, and then you know how difficult or how easy it will be to get that basically a suitable job. And also depends on the time, because if you're willing to wait a bit longer and apply more often, of course, then if you can afford that and you have the time, then you can just take the chance to see if you can get a job in the, let's say, in the dream location, where the employer has to do more work to get you a visa, or to basically, or do all these things, than in other locations. So you can also test it, but it's basically, in the first place, it's about having the knowledge about the market, about the job market. So yeah, so this is basically what, and everything else follows out of that.
I have it's a point that I feel like will be a little bit of not a refutal, a rebuttal of the sort, not necessarily to rebut your very positive outlook on the situation or very positive contribution to the idea, where yes, I totally 100% agree that a person's market value and what they're bringing to the table matters extremely, it matters a lot. However, like, their first goal, I believe, is not just finding a job, but it's finding a job in Canada. Of course, there's a whole mindset thought that has to go with that, of course, to really assess, like, what do you really want out of finding a job in Canada? But like, if their goal is, okay, trying to go to Canada to work in the Canadian economy, their ability, I'm not going to say they can't, but the ability to convince an employer locally in Canada, in a place that is heavily populated like Toronto, that what they're bringing to the table is way more than anybody else that is applying in Toronto, and having them go through a process that can be a year long. It doesn't have to be a year-long process, but it can be a year-long process. For them to want to go through the paperwork, I feel like most employers won't. Not just the employer, because the government has to make an assessment too, right? So so whereas the employer is probably convinced that, okay, you know what, this person is worth it. Because I was in that position to some extent, right? I was in that position when I just started my immigration journey, trying to transition from a student. And my employer was willing to say, we need her, not in Jamaica, we need her here in Canada, right? And they saw my value and market value and all that stuff. But to convince the government then of that is another story, right? Because they don't get to have an interview with the candidates, right? They don't get to have an interview with the other candidates as well. And the employer has to put on paper and submit resumes. So there's like, this is the process that I recall. I don't know if it's changed, but they had to show, like, we got these resumes, and this candidate didn't qualify because of this, and this candidate, and then what the government is seeing is just black and white, right? Resumes that are all saying, oh, I have the qualifications, oh, I have the work experience to do this job. So for you, the employer, to say that, no, they have the qualifications, but this one is the, I feel like it will be a challenging undertaking, not impossible. I'm just thinking it's a challenging undertaking to even want to try to do it that way, meaning trying to just find a regular non-specialized job in Toronto.
Well, it's, as I said, it's a question of the market value, because if you have in mind someone who has an ordinary job, nothing special to offer, well, then of course all of that is true. But that's not the situation of everyone who is somewhere located in the world wanting to move to Canada, because if you, let's say, one of the few specialists on, I don't know, particular technology, and there are not that many in the world, and you have 30 years of work experience, and you speak 4 languages, and you make, I don't know, $300,000 a year, then it may not be that difficult. and it may not be difficult for the company to get you in because maybe they have done it before with your colleagues who they got basically on the same route. So yes, of course, that does not apply to most potential immigrants. Absolutely correct. Therefore, it is important to know about your market value. Well, that may be high, but it could also be low. So if the market value is low, then you should be realistic and not go for options that are no options at all, that are just like dreams. So then you need to kind of take a little detour and come back to the idea later when you are in better shape. However, I'm saying that because there is a danger of people not going for what they could and failing because of that.
Yeah.
So because if you apply for jobs that you're overqualified for, you may not get the job because of that. Then that makes you think, oh my God, I don't even get that. I have to lower my expectations even further. So you basically reduce your market value in a way more and more, which then actually gives you more and more problems to get any job still, as opposed to confidently apply for a position that you are truly qualified for, that you would get in other countries as well, where you don't have the visa issue, and then basically behave like any other applicant would, and confidently ask for a certain, the right amount of money and the right type of job and anything that goes with it. So and this is what you should do, because this is also the easiest, as it is basically the maximum realistic setting you can go for. So it should be realistic. It should be according to your market value, yes, but it must not be beyond that or higher than that, because then you won't have the chance. But it should not be lower than that either, because then your chances will sink too, as you will be overqualified, and there will be people who will be cheaper than you are. And why should then the company hire you? So there is a danger to get it wrong in both, basically in both directions. And therefore it is not, it's dangerous to say, oh, go for a compromise, lower your expectations as much as you can. That's the safest way to get a job in Canada. No, it's not. The safest way to get a job in Canada is to be realistic. And if you are like a decorated, international scientist, then lowering your expectations is not a good idea. But of course, if you are a recent graduate, then it's not a good idea to apply as if you were the decorated scientist with 30 years work experience.
Yeah.
So it boils down to doing research on what the situation is like in terms of your background, your industry, the place you would like to go to in Canada. And once you have this information, then it should be rather easy to know what you should do and what you shouldn't, in terms of, can you expect an employer to do a little more for you because they really want you, or can you be happy if you get a job at all because there are actually others that are equally qualified. So therefore, don't take pot luck. Whatever you do should come out of knowledge, and the knowledge comes out of research. So this is the important thing. So it starts with researching all the programs and the options and the local or regional job markets, and then you have to relate that to your situation, and then you still need to basically find a way that whatever you believe is true can be told to the other side, the potential employers, in a convincing way. So because the fact that it's true is not good enough. They also have to believe it. So you need to pay attention and put in the time it takes to prepare especially your resume in a way that they can see it in it. So these are basically the steps you need to follow.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I think it's like this undertaking is not, I don't think it should be taken lightly. You shouldn't just book a plane ticket and show up in Canada, right? There's some underground work that you need to do that includes your resume, that includes your research, and that includes like knowing really where, boundaries in terms of your upper limit, your lower limit in terms of what kind of job, what kind of pay, and going somewhere where the soil is fertile and not just any old where and hoping for the best. And we had like a perfect scenario of that in our club, where we had somebody who is in Jamaica looking for a job in healthcare. We have somebody in Canada looking for a job in healthcare. They both can't find a job. One came to Canada as a visitor and was not able to find a job. And that's a perfect example of like, no matter, I feel like in that situation, I don't want to say how good you are, but like, yes, the market value, but obviously there are landed immigrants in Canada looking for jobs in healthcare. And for an employer to say, yes, I'll take you, knowing that the government knows that there are healthcare students that are going to graduate school in September or whatever the case may be, like, it's not a good idea. Don't do that, right? So prepare yourself. 1, 2, know that what you see at face value or somebody just saying, oh, visitor to worker, is more than just showing up in Canada as a visitor and trying to work. And sell yourself. And like Michael said, it can go wrong in both directions in terms of you going the wrong place, but also you shooting too low for the type of job, or maybe shooting too high for the type of job. And there are places where there are LMIA exempt employers already that may have a job offer that is in alignment with your skill set and your market value and maybe your pay scale. So in a nutshell, that's the visitor to worker program. Go ahead.
Yeah, the question is why, if it is not as easy to then go to Canada and get the job there, because there is this visitor to worker visa, raises the question, why is this there? Why does it exist if it's not so easy? Well, you have to understand the government can only do what the government's job is. The government's job is not to get you a job. The government's job is to make it easy for employees, also foreign employees or potential employees, and the Canadian employers to make it as easy as possible for both of them, for both sides, to get together and get this done. Mm-hmm. So this is what the government has to do, but this is all the government can do. So the government it's not the government's job to get you a job or find employees. So what this is, the reason why they create this is that if someone wants to employ you, and then they say, but before we sign the contract, it would be actually nice if you could show up and, have a meeting in person, which is not so common anymore, not so critical, but before COVID, it simply, usually was the case. They wanted to see you before they made the final decision. They may be willing to pay for that, depending on the type of job. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but they wanted to see you. So it becomes a hassle if then the government says, oh, but you need to have a special visa for that, and you need to have a business visa or even a special visa that you are allowed to come and then do the interview. And or let's say you are a visitor and you are lucky and someone talks to you and they would like to employ you, and then it is the visa situation that prevents them, although everything else is clear, from employing you. So the government recognized that and said, well, that doesn't need to be a problem. We allow people who only have the visitor's visa to basically stay and get a job if everything else has been sorted out. So, and that's it. So it is about making it easy to actually get together, do the job interviews or anything like that. That means most of the work can be done and usually should be done regardless of where you are. If you're in Canada, fine, but if you're not, it is not a problem at all. So you can do all the research, the work on your resume, all it takes, the networking from wherever you are, and see that you get this stuff done. And in this case, you can rely on this particular provision by the government that it's easy and you don't have to worry about your visa status. But in terms of getting the job, it basically plays no role. It just makes things a bit even easier. But in terms of convincing someone who can hire you, it plays no role. So this is therefore, yes, it's good, but it does not change the fact that you need to do all these other things before. And everyone who's thinking about moving to Canada should keep this in mind. So yeah, maybe we can, I don't know, this is probably now getting too long, but I would suggest we have a follow-up video on the reasons, the strange reason why companies are desperately looking for employees, claim that they cannot find anyone. Then there are so and so many people and say, it's strange, I'm looking for a job, I cannot get one. The government is doing all they can to make it as easy as possible, creating more and more programs that apparently, and the programs are really good. Certainly by international standards, they were great. But so the government is doing all these things and still both sides complain. And there is a reason for that. And the good thing is it's really not the government's fault. So usually people complain about the government. There's no reason to complain about the Canadian government, or not much. There are other reasons. And these reasons have to do with the companies.
Isn't that the other video? Isn't that the other video? Are we getting into?
No, I'm not. I'm going to stop now. I'm just trying to produce a cliffhanger here.
Okay.
So this stuff has to do with the companies not knowing to hire, and all the people who claim to not being able to get a job, regardless of if they are in Canada or outside, who haven't done their homework in terms of how to apply properly. So, and we in the club are very happy to help. And we can also let our viewers know more about it in a separate video.
Yeah. And in addition,
this problem can be fixed. Absolutely.
Be fixed.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And just to add a little bit to that is that whereas the government opened up this program and they have they open up the program based on specific research or results from the research that they've done, which is to kind of say, okay, there are certain sectors where there are labor shortages. And that is very important too when you're thinking about the visitor to worker thing. What are the industries that need or have labor shortages or that have already LMIA exempt employers in Toronto, for example? Where are those employers and what sectors are they in? That is important information to know as well. On Friday, we are going to go live in the Canadian Dreamers Club. We're going to do a job search in Atlantic Canada and rural and northern Canada, and we're going to explore these job categories or the industries where there are labor shortages more. So if you are interested or you need help with that job search, join us on Friday at 2 p.m. Toronto time, where both Michael and I, right? Both Michael and I will be live inside the Canadian Dreamers Club, helping our clubbers or Canadian Dreamers to do their job search. And if you need one, come in. If this video was helpful to you, please give it a thumbs up, hit the like button, feel free to subscribe, stick around because we have more valuable content and information on Canadian immigration coming up every day for the next little while anyways. Remember, if you're not already registered for the the Great Canadian Immigration Summit coming up in September. It's a 4-day-long event that will be everything Canadian immigration. So no matter where you are, if you're stuck in your thinking, I don't want to say stuck in your country. There's nothing wrong being in your country and being home in your country. But if you are stuck in the process of either starting, or you're along the way and you're stuck, or you're here and you're stuck as to what's next for you, join us on the summit. It's going to be a 4-day long thing that will help you no matter where you are in your Canadian immigration journey. Like this video again, subscribe, share, and we'll see you in the next video.